The narrative surrounding the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie demands a profound re-examination. In the early days of the investigation, the prevailing theory painted this as a clumsy, unsophisticated kidnapping. It was viewed as calculated, certainly, yet lacking the hallmarks of a truly complex criminal enterprise. We are looking at a fragile, 84-year-old victim reliant on a pacemaker and a strict regimen of daily cardiac medications who has simply ceased to exist for 38 agonizing days. Dr. Phil McGraw recently vocalized the grim biological reality of that timeline during a public broadcast, breaking down the exact medical mathematics of her survival. He detailed the catastrophic deterioration that inevitably ravages an elderly system like hers, once stripped from a stable environment and deprived of life-sustaining pharmaceuticals. Add to that the overwhelming physiological trauma of being held hostage for 38 uninterrupted days. His delivery was chillingly soft and remarkably precise, leaving behind a suffocating, absolute silence in the studio the moment he stopped speaking. It is a very distinct, heavy atmosphere that settles over a criminal investigation, the exact moment seasoned experts abandon hopeful guesswork and begin relying on cold, hard mathematics. That is the chilling pivot point where the frantic search for a missing woman gradually transforms into a much darker, far more subdued reality. It morphs into a deeply calculated pursuit, an unspoken truth that remains off the record, but echoes loudly within the closed walls of any precinct. It is the silent understanding shared among detectives and prosecutors huddled over crime scene photographs and sealed warrants. That exact, suffocating quiet infiltrated the Guthrie inquiry many weeks in the past. Ordinary citizens sensed the shift instinctively, even if they lacked the vocabulary to articulate it, just as the media and the relentless churn of online forums felt the temperature drop. The rhetorical framing deployed by the Pima County Sheriff's Office fundamentally altered its trajectory. The cadence of their press briefings ground to a deliberate crawl, yet this hesitation never masked a deficit of clues. Instead, it radiated strategic intent. These were authorities harboring explosive secrets, meticulously curating the vast gulf between the grim truths they held and the sanitized facts they fed to the masses. Dr. McGraw essentially bridged that very chasm. While he stopped short of issuing formal indictments or broadcasting specific identities, he constructed a psychological and forensic paradigm so deeply rooted in the offender's profile that it forces us to reevaluate every single artifact collected by law enforcement thus far. Stepping before the lens, he articulated the dark design that the blueprint of this abduction has been screaming since the dawn of February 1st, 2026. He contextualized the presence of two distinct genetic signatures: the sinister dry run executed precisely 9 days prior to the snatching, the awkwardly positioned concealed carry strap, the obstructed surveillance lens on the front porch, and that hyper-specific 41-minute window of execution, weaving them into one inevitable, terrifying conclusion. His assessment did not deal in hypotheticals. He definitively mapped out the exact fate that awaited the elderly captive. By filtering the physical clues through advanced criminal pattern analysis and behavioral profiling, he exposed what the perpetrators had designed as their endgame from the very first moment. The razor-thin margin separating the chaotic reality of the crime from its original master plan is precisely the shadow where the ultimate truth of this mystery lies concealed. Pay close attention, as the explicit words spoken by the television psychologist and the empirical data anchoring his claims actually form two profoundly intertwined facets of a single, devastating breakthrough. By the conclusion of this analysis, the intersection of those two realities will be unmistakably clear. Yet, before we dissect his actual proclamation or unpack the heavy forensic implications of the roadmap he provided, we must first understand why his public dissection of this tragedy demands to be treated as legitimate investigative insight rather than mere Hollywood sensationalism. The man earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from North Texas State University, rooting his expertise in formal academic rigor. Long before the studio lights found him, he forged a formidable career acting as a strategic consultant in the courtroom. That is an unforgiving arena demanding the mastery of deciphering microexpressions, weighing human truthfulness, and stitching together shattered evidence into airtight psychological portraits. For decades, he has sat face-to-face with the key players of infamous crimes, interrogating everyone from the predators to the survivors. the grieving relatives to the lead detectives. Furthermore, his professional network boasts retired federal agents, forensic pathologists, and elite profilers that traditional newsrooms could never hope to access. When it comes to the shadowy circumstances surrounding this specific disappearance, his insights have uncannily predicted the investigative trajectory, staying steps ahead of the official police narrative. Therefore, when he positioned himself before the microphone to map out the brutal trajectory of her captivity, he was not offering the flimsy guesses of an armchair sleuth. He was delivering a masterclass in comprehensive, synthesized criminal breakdown. He possessed the exact same dossier of public clues that every dedicated investigator on this case has reviewed: the chilling porch security recordings, the physical parameters outlined by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the rigid chronological map, the dual genetic markers, the extortion demands, the subtle psychological leaks caught on tape, the rap sheet of a known suspect orbiting the periphery, the desolate terrain, and the chillingly precise methods. He absorbed every fragment of this darkness, distilled it, and arrived at a singular, inescapable verdict. When you hold his final determination up to the cold light of verified facts, it completely sheds the guise of mere conjecture. It presents as the flawless execution of forensic logic driven to its absolute limit. This is the dark reality he proposed, and this is why the empirical data supports his every word. His foundational thesis was utterly bone-chilling. This victim was not plucked from her life by some random twist of fate, nor was she a target of spontaneous opportunity. Her kidnapping was executed as a cold-blooded commodity exchange, a highly structured, financially motivated operation where her human life was assigned a strict monetary value well before the snatch. Yanking her from her home was merely the opening gambit. Keeping her breathing was designed purely to serve as their negotiating power. He labeled the blueprint of this nightmare as highly deliberate, and if the demands of that violent leverage were ignored, he described the ultimate consequence as tragically inevitable. He constructed a psychological blueprint of the perpetrators, a profile so chillingly precise that it practically painted their faces, creating an analytical framework that investigators simply could not ignore. The architect of this crime, he observed, did not view Nancy Guthrie's fragility as a hindrance, but rather weaponized it as a crucial strategic advantage. Her physical limitations turned the act of containment into an effortless endeavor, while her reliance on a cardiac pacemaker transformed her fragile health into the ultimate tool of coercion. Furthermore, her direct bloodline to a highly visible national icon, her daughter, Savannah Guthrie of the NBC Today broadcast, provided a crystal-clear motive for the underlying transaction. It broadcasted an undeniable message to those orchestrating the plot. Her value lay not in her humanity, but in her undeniable power as the ultimate bargaining chip. This was designed to be a high-stakes negotiation where the captors held all the cards until McGraw delivered a chilling assessment that completely shattered the existing narrative. He asserted that when a crime possesses this exact anatomy targeting an aging, medically fragile victim tied to immense wealth or a highly public platform, the stakes shift dramatically. Furthermore, when the orchestration reveals such undeniable pre-attack intelligence, it becomes evident that the intruders were intimately familiar with the layout of the home long before they struck. They had meticulously studied her daily habits, intimately understood her physical constraints, and thoroughly analyzed the perimeter defenses well in advance of the breach. In scenarios like this, the mathematical probability of bringing the victim home alive plummets at a terrifying and historically verifiable rate. This shrinking survival window is rarely driven by a direct desire to kill, but rather dictated by the unforgiving biological reality of an 84-year-old human body. When a woman tethered to a pacemaker is violently ripped from her safe haven, stripped of her life-saving medications, and subjected to the sheer terror of abduction, the physiological toll is catastrophic. Her physical stability is not a permanent guarantee under those conditions. The human heart operates on a strictly ticking biological clock. The minds that engineered this nightmare either comprehended that fatal countdown and accounted for it, or they were fatally ignorant of the chain reaction they triggered. Any miscalculation in that regard leads to entirely irreversible consequences, a grim reality that Dr. Phil ruthlessly dragged into the light. He did not offer coordinates, the identity of the suspects, or a definitive conclusion, but rather exposed the cold, mechanical logic driving Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. He laid bare the inescapable biological truth that this operational strategy was battling against from the very second she was dragged out her front door. McGraw's analytical profile does not simply float in the realm of theory. It aligns flawlessly with the concrete forensic evidence that investigators have painstakingly gathered. That horrifying symmetry elevates his observation from mere speculation into a profound investigative breakthrough, beginning with the deeply unsettling 9-day dry run. Deep in the night of January 23, 2026, a shadowy silhouette was quietly recorded by a nearby security lens. This phantom figure traced a deliberate path that, when cross-referenced with the invasion footage from February 1st, perfectly mirrors the exact same approach vector. Over a week before the actual kidnapping, an unknown operative rehearsed the intrusion, probing for vulnerabilities and carefully synchronizing their stopwatch. They successfully verified that the exterior approach to the Guthrie property could be breached under the cover of night without sounding a single alarm or waking a single neighbor. This was no crime of passion or sudden impulse. It was calculated, documented tactical surveillance, making the January 23rd dry run a terrifying matter of fact, not an educated guess. It is permanently etched into the digital record. Now, shift focus to the agonizing 41-minute gap. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, the primary exterior camera was manually disabled. By 2:28 in the morning, the digital tether connecting Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker to her smartphone was severed. A terrifying void of 41 minutes. Detectives are convinced that this dark window marks the exact moment she was forcibly extracted from the sanctuary she had called home for more than 50 years. Executing that time frame demanded a waiting extraction vehicle, a pre-cleared escape trajectory, and a coordinated effort meaning at least one infiltrator inside the house and a getaway driver idling in the shadows. McGraw's behavioral analysis points to an extortion scheme underpinned by cold, mathematically calculated logistics. That 41-minute abyss is the terrifying reality of those logistics put into practice. But the mystery deepens when examining the absent pacemaker transmission. Authorities launched an aerial search grid, utilizing an advanced piece of technology that insiders described to CBS News as a highly sensitive signal sniffer. This specialized Bluetooth tracker is specifically engineered to lock onto the unique radio frequencies pulsed out by an active cardiac implant, because a functioning pacemaker is always whispering to the world. Provided Nancy Guthrie is still drawing breath, that medical device is continuously transmitting its digital heartbeat, and investigators have been scanning the airways relentlessly. Yet, the scanners have remained agonizingly silent. The combination of that silence and the timeline forms the most damning, unspoken conclusion this entire investigation has drawn regarding her ultimate fate. Dr. Phil's psychological assessment shines a glaring light on a crucial element that the media frenzy surrounding this mystery has completely failed to grasp. It forces us to ask the terrifying question: exactly how many shadows were moving in the dark that night? His deductions strongly suggest a highly synchronized conspiracy rather than a lone wolf, a theory practically set in stone by the crime lab's discovery of two distinct genetic signatures. The existence of those two profiles serves as the undeniable cornerstone upon which every single theory in this investigation must now be built. One strand of biological evidence was meticulously harvested from a discarded nitrile glove discovered roughly 2 miles away from the victim's property. Found on February 13th, it lay abandoned along a desolate stretch of asphalt that detectives have pinpointed as the crew's most likely escape route. This piece of discarded evidence bore a striking visual similarity to the dark handwear spotted on the prowler in the initial security footage. Investigators fed the genetic sequence into CODIS, the FBI's massive federal database housing over 19 million criminal blueprints, only to be met with a frustrating dead end. The microscopic trace points to an unidentified male who has never left a genetic footprint in any correctional or booking system wired into the national grid. Meanwhile, a second, entirely separate genetic signature was lifted directly from biological remnants left behind within the violated walls of the home. The Pima County Sheriff has openly declared that detectives strongly suspect this secondary microscopic trace belongs directly to the mastermind behind the abduction. What forensic technicians uncovered was a complex biological puzzle, a mixed genetic profile, confirming that the microscopic traces left behind belong to more than just a solitary phantom. Deep inside a specialized, privately run laboratory in Florida, scientists are meticulously untangling this overlapping DNA, definitively proving that these two distinct biological blueprints are entirely unrelated to one another. A pair of anonymous actors, leaving behind two unique cellular fingerprints, two completely different human beings who shed their defining biological essence within the very same theater of crime. The geography of the evidence paints a chilling picture. One genetic fragment was recovered from a discarded glove abandoned exactly 2 miles down a desolate, dusty escape route. The second molecular ghost materialized deep inside the residence of an 84-year-old victim, a fragile woman incapable of traversing even 50 yards without help. The division of labor was clear: a perimeter watchman and an interior operative. Ever since the 13th of February, the cold, hard science has whispered a terrifying truth. The foundational blueprint of a dual-actor conspiracy is permanently etched into the microscopic evidence. The psychological framework constructed by behavioral experts demands precisely this sort of calculated, multi-tiered dynamic. You simply cannot execute a premeditated human transaction solo, not when extracting a frail target demands physical carrying across a courtyard, slipping past perimeter gates, and vanishing into a getaway car in less than 41 minutes, all while entirely avoiding the gaze of the world. The sheer physical geometry of the abduction screams for absolute, synchronized teamwork. Forensic biology perfectly aligns with that theory, unequivocally proving that an alliance existed. The microscopic traces and the physical constraints both illuminate the exact same terrifying operational truth. Beyond mere physical logistics, the leading behavioral analysis ventures into far darker territory, delving deep into the twisted psychological makeup of the mastermind orchestrating this nightmare. It is this distinct psychological fingerprint, the silent echoes of the perpetrator's mindset, that whittles down the suspect pool far more ruthlessly than any sterile mathematical probability ever could. Analyzing the security footage, former federal agent Brianna Fox observed a deeply unsettling reality. The phantom caught on the lens navigated the space with a deeply ingrained, almost utterly relaxed sense of ease. They moved with the terrifying swagger of a predator who already considered those grounds to be their own backyard. Looking at those identical digital frames, retired intelligence director Andrew McCabe pointed out the profound lack of hesitation. There was no creeping paranoia, no anxious glancing over the shoulder. We are not watching a blind trespasser carefully feeling their way through the dark, unknown shadows of a foreign environment. Instead, we are witnessing the choreographed steps of an individual who has practically memorized the terrain, someone perfectly aware of which floorboards creak, exactly how the latch operates, and precisely where the electronic eyes fall blind. Such an intimate connection to the layout was absolutely not born from a solitary dry run conducted back on the 23rd of January. One quick scouting trip cannot possibly forge the chillingly calibrated arrogance displayed on the security feed from February 1st. That deep-seated comfort is the direct product of lingering, repeated closeness. It stems from practically living within the target's orbit over a prolonged period, digesting the exact layout of the property through a relentless pattern of chronic, obsessive exposure. The leading psychological assessment tackled this unsettling reality head-on. Analysts concluded that the shadowy figures held access to a level of intimate intelligence that no amount of simple street-level stalking could ever yield. They possessed an almost telepathic awareness of her domestic habits, her hidden physical weaknesses, and the exact moments she would predictably wander toward the main threshold. They knew the precise, fleeting duration of the dead zone, the silent, vulnerable hours ticking away between her final evening phone call with loved ones and her very first scheduled appointment at dawn. You simply do not glean that kind of hyper-specific scheduling by peering through binoculars from a parked car. That knowledge is harvested by swimming inside the victim's personal inner circle over a sustained span of time. Even the perpetrator's gear whispers of this contradiction. A concealed carry strap, awkwardly and incorrectly strapped over the exterior of a heavy winter coat, paints a fascinating psychological portrait. Multiple veteran federal profilers looked at the weapons arrangement and came to the exact same conclusion. The tactical equipment was painfully out of sync with the user. Retired Special Agent Steve Moore put it bluntly, the setup was entirely wrong, betraying a complete and total absence of legitimate, professional combat training. This assailant intellectually recognized that flashing steel instantly bends a victim's will, yet they completely lacked the muscle memory required to actually wield the tool with lethal efficiency. An expert on the victim's private life, but a total amateur in the theater of violence. It is a paradox pointing straight toward an individual intimately woven into the target's daily existence. Yet, simultaneously, they were so painfully detached from actual criminal streetcraft that they were forced to awkwardly cobble together their tools of terror. The hypothesis labeling this nightmare as a calculated financial exchange is not merely built on academic profiling. It is backed by a terrifying paper trail, a series of extortion letters that began trickling into newsrooms on the 3rd of February, 2026. A premier entertainment news outlet caught the initial drop, while a pair of local broadcasting networks in Tucson simultaneously uncovered exact carbon copies. Woven into the ink were hyper-specific fragments of Nancy Guthrie's private reality and domestic sanctuary secrets, completely hidden from the public eye and media broadcasts. These were chilling breadcrumbs that instantly shrank the universe of potential writers down to a tight circle of suspects who physically interacted with her private realm. The blackmailers provided a specialized cryptocurrency address alongside a pair of hard deadlines. Both ticking clocks expired in silence, leaving the digital vault entirely barren. By the 11th of February, a new digital whisper emerged, striking a drastically different chord. This messenger positioned themselves not as the captor, but as an omniscient observer possessing the names of the kidnappers. The price for their supposed omniscience? A solitary digital coin carrying a massive real-world valuation of roughly $66,000. Journalists cross-referenced the materials, confirming on national broadcasts that these dual manifestos were unequivocally birthed by entirely separate minds. The psychological warfare escalated on the 13th of February when a third missive surfaced, taunting detectives with the grim promise that their quarry was bleeding across international lines. To seasoned investigators, the implication was obvious. A dark nod toward the southern frontier, an escape route sitting a mere 90 minutes below the Tucson city limits. Yet it was the fourth letter, intercepted on the 16th of February, that captivated retired federal profiler Jim Clemente. The terrifying syntax painted the author as someone practically breathing the same air as the crime. The text coldly labeled the central perpetrator as the primary figurehead, utilizing the icy, corporate terminology of someone mapping out an illicit syndicate, a clear boss backed by obedient subordinates. The profiler's final assessment was poetic and terrifying. This writer did not strike the match, but they were standing close enough to the inferno to feel its scorching heat long before the smoke ever reached the public eye. We have 4 separate messages, penned by at least 2 distinct hands, constructing a sinister financial web fueled by cryptocurrency timeframes and deliberate blind spots. The sinister exchange outlined by Dr. McGraw was never just some theoretical, hindsight-driven concept. It was the exact blueprint physical clues had whispered to investigators since the 3rd of February. According to verified intelligence, the hunt for Nancy Guthrie has shifted into what Pima County authorities officially call a highly targeted, concentrated investigative stage. The initial frenzy has calcified into a specialized task force, locked exclusively on this single mystery for the long haul. The authorities made their position chillingly clear. This pursuit is fiercely alive, and the manhunt will not pause until Nancy Guthrie is recovered or every conceivable clue burns out. The complex genetic tracing of biological material pulled from that discarded glove is officially underway. This biological sleuthing, the exact technique that unmasked the Golden State Killer after 40 years, does not require the perpetrator to willfully surrender their genetic blueprint. The trap merely needs a single, distant relative to have casually swabbed their cheek. It could be a cousin or a parent submitting to Ancestry, 23andMe, or MyHeritage, completely blind to the monster their curiosity might eventually corner. The mathematical odds that this faceless phantom, the man who left his cellular signature behind on that fabric, possesses a bloodline utterly absent from every commercial ancestry registry and government database borders on absolute statistical zero. That ancestral web is being woven, one twisted branch at a time. Every dead end slowly forces the predator into a tighter corner. Each biological match drags law enforcement one step closer to the exact spot where a killer's true identity lies waiting. Simultaneously, detectives are scrutinizing the mysterious vehicle caught on surveillance 2.5 miles from the victim's estate at 2:30 in the morning on February 1st. Captured a mere 2 minutes after the pacemaker vanished from the network, this sighting is being aggressively matched against digital pings from every mobile antenna lining that desolate corridor. Any smartphone passing through that 2.5-mile zone between 2 and 3 o'clock that morning whispered its location to a mast. Every digital footprint was archived. Heather Barnhart, a cyber tracking expert who hunted the digital ghost of Brian Koberger, perfectly encapsulated this chilling reality. She noted that the device in your pocket acts as an ever-watchful, invisible observer. The very same technological web that lulls criminals into a false sense of nighttime anonymity is exactly what maps their every clandestine footstep. Investigators are tracing that 25-liter Ozark Trail rucksack, digging through exclusive retail receipts and scouring underground resale markets. Meanwhile, authorities are canvassing firearm dealers throughout Tucson, searching for the buyer of a distinctive belly strap flagged by the lead sheriff. Then there is the $1 million bounty, put forward by the victim's loved ones on the 24th of February. That vast sum dangles in front of anyone holding even a fragment of the truth about that fateful winter morning. It goes far beyond politely rewarding Good Samaritans. It aggressively monetizes their silence. The immense weight of that temptation creates a fatal fracture point for a criminal syndicate already plagued by multiple conspirators and prior communications. With extortion threats emerging from at least 2 distinct voices, a monumental secret simply cannot stay buried indefinitely among greedy accomplices. Right now, someone lingering on the fringes of this abduction is quietly running the numbers. They are weighing their dangerous knowledge against their debts, visualizing exactly how a 7-figure payout could rewrite their entire existence. That dark arithmetic only ever ends in betrayal. The only lingering mystery is the exact moment they break. On broadcast, Dr. McGraw simply echoed the grim psychological profile and physical clues accumulating since 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. He outlined the anatomy of the extortion and exposed the captor's leverage. He confronted the physiological ticking clock, the brutal reality of a victim's body shutting down each day. It lacks critical prescriptions. He highlighted the terrifying absence of routine cardiovascular care that previously allowed an 84-year-old cardiac patient to safely function inside her home for 5 decades. The medical community supports his dark assessment, and the physical evidence perfectly mirrors the conspiracy he theorized. Meanwhile, the relentless manhunt fueled by bleeding-edge genetic tracing algorithms and tightly cross-matched mobile network logs and the massive gravitational pull of a $1 million public bounty is closing the gap on that missing identity at the ancestral root. It marches forward with the exact same silent, terrifying certainty that began the second law enforcement breached the threshold of that property. Standing inside that Catalina Foothills residence, officers knew instantly this was an orchestrated vanishing act, not a tragic mishap. The stark facts remain. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old and reliant on a pacemaker. For over 4 agonizing weeks, she has been missing from the very sanctuary that sheltered her for more than 5 decades. She was stalked and forcibly extracted by at least 2 perpetrators who recklessly bled their cellular secrets across the crime scene, and getaway route secrets currently being decoded in a Florida facility. The cold biology will ultimately cough up a suspect. It is inevitable. The broadcast psychologist painted the grim picture of her fate, but the microscopic evidence will unmask the monsters responsible. She has earned the right to be found. This dark chapter remains completely open. If you have tracked this twisted path since day one, leave a trace below. Tell us where you are watching from. Detail how the recent psychological analysis from Dr. Phil warped your perception of that fateful night. What chilling secrets will emerge once forensic genealogy finally untangles the roots of that genetic tree? We have consistently outpaced the official narrative. Anchor yourself to this pursuit, subscribe, and trigger those alerts. We break the silence the second a suspect is unmasked or those genetic profiles are unsealed. That revelation will violently fracture the theories presented tonight. Witness the fallout. Pass this dossier to anyone demanding answers. A predator cannot hide from our collective gaze. The hunt remains relentless, and we will not stop. Not until she is.